Here is a video for language analysis for GCSE English. I've particularly got AQA in mind because that's the exam board that I teach, but language analysis is obviously a part of all exam boards and their courses. For this video, I'm going to be using the Kite Runner by Calatassini, a text that I've been teaching for years now for A-level, because there's often quite interesting pieces of description in there, and that's what I've done with this video. To begin with, before we look at a particular question, I'm just reminding you here of the two upper bands for the language question for paper 1, level 4, level 3. You can see that there are 3 components to each bit of the mark scheme. Students have to talk about the effects of language choice, they have to quote from the extracts, as well as they have to use terminology accurately as well. So level 3, level 4 is where I would want my students to be if they were going to be getting a comfortable GCSE, in other words, at least a grade 4 or above. For this question, we're going to be dealing with a tournament which is called a Bushkasi tournament. Pardon my pronunciation there if it's wrong. Which is a traditional Central Asian sport in which horse-mounted players attempt to place a goat or calf carcass in a goal. It's part of a sporting event, and because the Kite Runner is partly set in Afghanistan, that's why this particular form of sport might not be familiar to us here in the UK or in the West. So that's what that means. The question then, how does the writer use language to describe the Bushkasi tournament? 8 marks, paper 1, question 2. As you will know, you will get a section of the extract to look at specifically for language. This is quite a long part, quite a long section for it actually, but again, it's possible. And the examiner is saying within this extract, there is all your answers that you need. The examiner doesn't actually specify how many words or quotes you use. I have always said to students that it's far better to do quality, not quantity. So I would much rather they talk about 1 or 2 words in detail in terms of effects, rather than try and talk about lots in less effects, in less detail. Because at the end of the day, this is assessing students' ability to talk about the effects on readers. So what you should do in the exam is you should take in a highlighter or a coloured pen or pencil really, and be prepared to engage with the extract, to not be afraid of it, to dive right into it and circle and underline and annotate things in order to help you when you come to write your response. This is a 10-minute task, it's very short, this is by no means an essay, it's by no means a thesis, so you have to be realistic about what you can do. And if you actually look at the exemplars from the exam board, for AQA this is, some students do very well just by writing a page. So we're not here expecting students to write 10,000 words because that is ridiculous in the time. So I'm going to read through this, and you might want to jot down or underline or whatever you want to do some words that you would want to talk about if you were going to be answering to the examiner. How does this tournament, how is it presented to us? So the narrator of the Kite Runner, who's called Amir, says, I remember one time Baba, that's his father, took me to the Ali Bushkashi tournament and took place on the first day of spring, New Year's Day. Bushkashi was and still is Afghanistan's national passion. A Shapandaz, a highly skilled horseman usually patronised by rich aficionados, has to snatch a goat or cattle carcass from the midst of a melee, carry the carcass with him around the stadium at full gallop, and drop it in the scoring circle, while a team of other Shapandaz chases him and does everything in its power, kick, claw, whip, punch, to snatch the carcass from him. That day the crowd roared with excitement as the horsemen on the field bellowed their battle cries and jostled for the carcass in a cloud of dust. The earth trembled with the clatter of hooves. We watched from the upper bleachers as riders pounded past at full gallop, yipping and yelling, foam flying from their horses' mouths. So what you need to do at this point is I would suggest you pause the video, because you might not have this extract in front of you on paper, and jot down some ideas as to what words give you an indication of how this tournament is supposed to be depicted to you as the reader. How is the writer using language here then to depict this tournament, and how is the tournament being depicted and shown to you through the language that is being used? So I would pause the video now and have a go at identifying some words that you think are relevant to that. Okay, so really important that you engage with the extract with a highlighter. Don't be afraid of language, because it's the words that you are highlighting here which are going to be the words that you probably refer to in your response. Just to prompt you then, and just to give you an indication of what you might want to identify, I've colour-coded it here. We've got some yellow words here. You can see that this is a pattern really of words that run throughout most of the extract. We've also got two other devices here in blue and green. And I've got some questions here on the right-hand side. What do all the yellow words have in common, for example, in terms of their meanings? What effects do they create for the readers? They all have something in common. Can you identify what it is? What name of words are these in yellow? And what are the devices in blue and green? And finally, I suppose the most important question in terms of the effects is, how does the writer want us to see this event, this sporting tournament? How are we supposed to view it as a reader? Because obviously we're not there. We're in our armchairs at home reading this book. So the writer is going to have to use language to manipulate us to believe that this tournament is X, Y, and Z. So we've got to be able to work out what the writer had in mind when they were using words like this to describe it. How do we see it? How do we visualize it? What is the imagery that's created? So the answers to those questions will often be important in terms of your response. So again, I'm not sure actually in 10 minutes whether students would be able to talk about all of those words I've highlighted, but it gives you enough choice and it gives you something to fall back on. Rather than trying to, be very, I suppose, minimal with your words. At least it gives you something to fall back on. And it's always impressive, I find, when students do find patterns of words in an extract, like the yellow words here. A pattern like a semantic field, it's a group of words that all share the same meanings, which might run consistently throughout the whole extract rather than just in one place. So clearly, these yellow words run pretty much throughout the whole of this extract. So if we're going to use, I suppose, a diagram in order to think about beginning to put this all together, then in the middle we have words that we would use to describe this tournament. The writer clearly is wanting us to see this tournament as chaotic, violent, dangerous, aggressive, unsafe, and so on. And it's the devices around the outside and the connotations around the outside that creates that impression for us. As I said, we're not there, so we are relying on the reader to depict this tournament to us in a particular way, however they want to. So clearly the writer wants us to see the tournament as this in the middle. And we've got to therefore use these words in our response in order to talk about the effects, because it's the words that help us see this tournament like that. So I'm going to now show you three examples of a response. I'm going to start by showing you a grade 1 to 3, then a grade 4 to 6, and then a grade 7 to 9. So you can see how students will have to write what the students will have to write in order to achieve a particular grade. Remember, grade 4 or above is the GCSE. So if your predicted grade is to actually achieve the GCSE this year, then you need to be aiming for a grade 4 or more, which is about half marks. So if this is an 8-mark question, then you need to get about 4 out of 8 or more to be on track to get the GCSE. Let's start with the grade 1 to 3 answer. The writer says that the tournament was out of control because the writer says that people were acting aggressively. Kick, claw, whip, punch makes it clear that the tournament was out of control and dangerous. It is also very loud, roared. Someone could easily get hurt. So you can see this isn't bad. They've quoted. They have also got some effects in there, but they're not very developed. So this probably would not get enough to get the grade 4, the GCSE standard. It's somewhere between grades 1 to 3. So you would need to adapt this a little bit more in order to be on track to get the GCSE. The next answer, you can see just by its length, begins to develop these ideas slightly more. So this would be what you would need to write if you were going to get grades 4 to 6, which in old-fashioned money would be kind of C grade to B grade. The writer presents the tournament as out of control and dangerous because of the erratic behaviour of the horses and sportsmen taking part. The writer reinforces the chaos through a list of verbs, kick, claw, whip, punch, which all have violent and forceful connotations, suggesting people could easily get hurt because of a lack of rules and regulation to ensure people's safety. The verbs roared and bellowed both reinforce how loud the tournament was, as if the loud list made the event even more disorientating and chaotic. The writer is emphasising for the reader how dramatic and unsafe the event is. So I believe this would now get you somewhere in the middle of the mark scheme. We've got good quoting, we've got good use of verbs, so terminology is in there. And they're also beginning now to think about words like reinforce and presents, which again suggesting as well there, suggesting that the student is aware that this is something that is being talked about for an effect here. This is a student who is clearly analysing. And there is also comment now on effects, out of control, dangerous, erratic behaviour. There is a greater confidence here in thinking about why the writer has decided to use the vocabulary that they have. So if you could write that, then that would be enough at least to get approximately half marks out of the total numbers. So that would be, I would suggest, a grade 4 or slightly above standard. If you're curious and you want to know what you would have to write like in order to get more full marks, I suppose, then it would be something like this. The writer foregrounds lawlessness and chaos of the tournament through a pattern of verbs which suggest the tournament is like a war or battle being fought because of the high levels of competition between teams. For example, the asyndetic list of verbs kick, claw, whip, punch emphasises the violence and brutality of the tournament, which appears not to have any rules to protect the safety of those playing. The repetition of alliteration at the end of the extract, foam flying and yipping and yelling, further demonstrates how the writer is depicting this sporting event as out of control and unsafe to both spectators and players. The sense of loudness adds to how it could be considered disorientating and unsettling. This is reinforced by the verbs snatched, jostled, roared and bellowed. All emphasise the drama and viciousness of the event and how it may conflict with a more westernised view of sport needing to be orderly and safe. The fact that Earth is personified as trembling emphasises the horse's power and strength. The ground has no choice but to submit to them weakly, and readers really get a sense of the thudding chaos as the horses race past. Readers may be awestruck and shocked by the level of brutality and force seen in order to win, and the writer may want us to see the event's chaos as part of its appeal. So I would argue that this would now be coming towards full marks. Very confident analysis, edging on perceptive there, confident use of quoting, confident use of terminology like personification, asyndetic list, and so on. And also perceptive effects, particularly the last point where it talks about how perhaps for these spectators, one of the reasons why they go is because it is so chaotic and so out of control, which is part of its appeal. So maybe that's part of it as well. So that would be what I would argue a grade 7 to grade 9 answer. You're looking here at perhaps 7 out of 8 or 8 out of 8, so coming up to full marks. Okay, so that is again a revision of the language question, paper 1, question 2. Also worth bearing in mind though that language for the AQA paper is obviously assessed in paper 2 as well, question 3. Exactly the same assessment objective. So as I have always said when I've taught GCSE, really important that students do have a firm grasp of language because it does underpin more than one question. And if you can get confident with language, it makes it so much more likely overall that you will pass and get your GCSE. All right, thank you.